Ed Sheeran, Ed, if you're listening, you're probably a nice fella, but as you say, it had a couple of drinks and it was just a massive error of judgment.
It doesn't look great from an aesthetic. It's not a great circuit, I don't think, to be honest, and it has no class. The Las Vegas Grand Prix.
It was called the exhibition gala.
Oh, the gala, yeah.
Because Ollie's obviously covered loads of figure skating before, like the madman he is. Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 22 with Mr. Oliver Wilson and myself, David. Right, Ollie, there's a lot to talk about today.
Why am I a double name and you're a single?
Because I don't want my surname out there, man. You know, when this gets too big and the fans are flocking at our front doors, I just want to have that plausible deniability and that anonymity to keep me safe. You know. Ollie, there's so much to get through in the pod. You've been sending me NFL and golf content all week. I know we want to talk F1. We want to talk about the rudest man alive, Ed Sheeran. I want to talk about Botafogo, the Brazilian bottlers. Racing won the Sudamericana. There's a million other things besides. But let's start with the Premier League title race. But first, how was your weekend, Ollie?
I mean, there's nothing better on a Monday morning, not only than waking up and recording another episode of Not Another Sports Podcast, but there's something great on a Monday when your favourite sports team has a big victory and a convincing victory. And the Eagles played on Sunday Night Football last night. I woke up this morning, watched the kind of 45-minute rerun of the game, and it's demolition of the LA Rams. And it just makes you feel a bit good still. And it's that sports fan that comes out. So I'm feeling very good this Monday morning, mate. How about yourself?
It's the childish part in everyone, isn't it? It's the fact that sport can bring you back to your childhood in that it matters, but also it completely doesn't matter. And it's why most people got into sport, I think, originally. My weekend was good, Ollie. As we know in this industry, Ollie and I both sports broadcasters and journalists, often you have to wander away from the sports that you're most connected to in order to keep the lights on. So I did 3 days of producing some figure skating content, Ollie. And like any random sport, people find this during the Olympics, you do find yourself gradually becoming more and more invested in the randomness of it. There was a point on Sunday morning where I was sat in an empty office next to the editor, who was our man, Mr. Mitchell. I was eating digestive biscuits at 6 in the morning. The event was in China. And I was watching, the figure skating had gone on all weekend. And the final event was more like a fun event. And so some of the skaters were dressed in fancy dress and costume.
So the free skate.
So I was watching, it was called the exhibition gala.
Oh, the gala, yeah.
Because Ollie's obviously covered loads of figure skating before, the madman he is. Ollie, I was watching these two figure skaters dressed up like chipmunks. And it's a dead office on a Sunday morning at 6 in the morning. And I found myself saying, oh, that was a really good twizzle. Because twizzle is a figure skating thing. So I was like, that's a hell of a twizzle right there. And I was just watching these two adults dressed as chipmunks figure skating. And I was just like, this is an absurd industry. What a way to earn a living. Absolutely bizarre.
That's one of those moments, I'm sure.
I'd have it no other way.
You check yourself and you go, I never thought in my wildest dreams that this would be a part of it. But it's not a bad part of it either, is it? And I'm just very glad that our careers have gone and met at this figure skating juncture as well, where we've now both covered a very high level of a sport that I don't think any of us or either of us would have been sat there at 12 years old going, that figure skating in China looks like a really good one. I'd love to be involved in that broadcast somehow. So yeah, I'm very pleased, man, you enjoyed it. And look, twizzle's a good twizzle at the end of the day.
It's some skill, it really is. All right, let's talk. The only way to start this pod, Ollie, is by talking about the Premier League title race. Because it was a hell of a weekend of Premier League football. And before we talk about Manchester City 0, Tottenham 4, I just want to talk about what happened before the match. Now, a lot of people, I don't think, saw this or cared about it, or Ollie's kind of nodding his head a little bit. You saw the Rodri tribute, yeah? Ollie, it was one of the most fucking ridiculous things I've seen in the Premier League in a long time. For anyone that hasn't seen it, Rodri, of course, the Ballon d'Or winner, who's injured and massively negatively impacted Manchester City's season. There was a tribute that went so above and beyond what was a rational tribute to Rodri in that moment. It was insane. And for me, Rodri came out, there was a guard of honour, and then there's this whole light show, which essentially looked to me like a gender reveal party. There was a huge light show for Rodri. and this massive tribute for Rodri. Now, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you're a Manchester City player. You've been told you can't win without Rodri. You're falling apart without Rodri. Rodri's the heartbeat of this team. Everything's going to be a disaster without Rodri. And you've been told that, and you've been told that, and you've been told that. Then during the international break, Pep Guardiola signs a new contract with Manchester City. So the narrative now is different. The narrative is Pep Guardiola has signed and he's going to stay at Manchester City Football Club. That's a huge shift. That's a big deal. That should have been what they took into this game against Tottenham, not this obscene tribute for Rodri, who's the best player in the world. He knows he's the best player in the world, okay? He's paid loads of money. Everyone gets it. You don't need to double down on this before a game against Tottenham. I thought it was absolutely insane. I thought I can't believe Pep Guardiola signed off on it, and he must have signed off on it, because those Manchester City players walking out, seeing this tribute to Rodri, they must have on some level thought, Jesus, we do miss him. We actually do miss him. And they should have moved on from that. And then Tottenham went there and won by 4-0, which we could talk about, Ollie. But I just thought, as a precursor to the game, I thought it was massively misplaced and misjudged to keep talking about Rodri when the obvious thing would have been to set the new narrative that Pep Guardiola's staying. And is that the reason that Man City lost 4-0? Probably not, but I don't think it helped.
Bar fucking humbug David Windsor as we move towards the Christmas season, exactly a month away from the big day. And Man City have their first ever Ballon d'Or winner. Their key player, who quite clearly this season without him, it's not completely fallen apart, but we're getting close to that point of a title race has almost completely fallen apart for Manchester City. And all they want to do is show what him, being a City player, winning the Ballon d'Or means to that club as another landmark moment of putting the club on the map up there with the Barcelonas, the Real Madrids, the Manchester Uniteds, etc. in terms of footballing history. And they want to celebrate one of the most influential players in that side. And Windsor goes, no, I can't have that. You definitely can have this. I'm not saying it wasn't a bit over the top. I found it odd how it was just, it looked like a budget Anthony Joshua entrance. Because you know Anthony Joshua, when he comes out at Wembley and stuff, he has the big kind of flaming AJ in the background. And City kind of did this, but there was nothing around the Rodri lights in the middle of the field. It was just plastic carpeting over the playing surface because they're about 3 minutes away from kickoff at this point when it's happening. And it looked actually a little bit cheap more than anything else. And I think Rodri looked a bit awkward, kind of taking it all in, particularly as the fact that he's not playing right now. So there is that. Here's what you could have won this season, guys, without Rodri's injury in the early part of the campaign. So I do think it felt awkward. There was a wonderfully awkward moment where Dave Jones, Sky presenter, who's an excellent presenter, really like him, but he said...
Fantastic.
And he said, Pep Guardiola, though, you know, he doesn't believe in these individual accolades. It's all about the team, as Guardiola gives Rodri this huge hug. I'm like, but also he's really pleased for his player, like quick backtrack and all that kind of thing. So it looked weird, but I don't mind it. How many times does your club get to celebrate having a Ballon d'Or winner for the first time? Once. So celebrate it. Enjoy it. Might not happen again for a long time. Might happen loads of times. And there's a difference to winning the Ballon d'Or as Man City right now as opposed to Man City in the past. You know, they're buying Ballon d'Or winners left, right and centre pretty much every single season. It was only a matter of time before one of them did win a Ballon d'Or. But enjoy the moment. Like, it's a celebration of football genius. And as fans, we should appreciate footballing quality and let them have their celebration. It's got nothing to do with what happened in the result, except for the fact that Rodri wasn't playing. Pep Guardiola's new contract is still the big talking point. This was just a nice celebration for an individual accolade at that club, which they supposedly don't believe in, but quite clearly also massively believe in. So the only problem is the hypocrisy around that, I think.
All right, I think we've given you a lovely little yin and yang there on Not Another Sports Pod. I could go on about this for half an hour, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it there so we got that nice equilibrium. The game itself, look, first of all, you've got to give credit to Tottenham. I think they are a fascinating side under Ange Postecoglou. The fact that they're the top scorers in the Premier League by a mile should tell you something. I mean, they're a goal-scoring team despite having lost Harry Kane. So I think they're a really, really exciting and interesting side. Obviously, defensively, they're leaky. They're missing their two centre-backs, so that's going to have a huge impact. It's the kind of result, Ollie, that if City had been on a great run and Tottenham had done that, you would have said, wow, that's unbelievable. But because it's off the back of 4 defeats before that, I don't know, possibly took a little bit of the gloss, I think, out of the Tottenham result as a standalone. But make no mistake about it, it's a win that Tottenham deserved, and it's a win that they really needed as well. It's very congested in the Premier League table, but it's a win that they really, really needed, I think, just to push them back up in contention in terms of the top four. What about City, Ollie? 5 defeats on the spin is
tough reading.
Pretty wild. You would have got massive odds on that, by the way, at the start of the season for that to happen. It's not going to be 6 defeats on the spin because they got finaled in the Champions League in midweek. They're not going to lose that at home before the game against Liverpool next weekend. 8 points off Liverpool at the top of the table. What do you read into this 5 defeats from 5 City? Is it just it's an old squad and this is the end of a cycle? Because if you look at the statistics of how many players, I think it's over the age of 28 or 29, have played for Manchester City this season, they have the most minutes played by players over the age of, I think it's 29. And I just think maybe it's just an aging squad. And I think Pep Guardiola signing that contract means that it won't happen in January. But I think next summer there's a big overhaul. Some players go out. A lot of young new players come in. And he tries to build again.
Yeah, that's a distinct possibility with the new deal, as you say. I think that's a massive talking point for the future of City. I think the immediate future becomes you have to win against Liverpool. If you don't, the title's done and dusted in terms of City's participation in it. Whether Liverpool will suffer a City-style slump this season, I just don't see it happening from what we've seen at the moment this year under Arne Slot. And more credit needs to go to him as stepping into the Premier League for the first time. And right now, it looks like Liverpool could walk this title race at this point. If they beat City, I think people will start saying they might actually be able to do that. And I think less about Pep Guardiola at this point and more talking about how this Dutchman's come in and just taken this Liverpool side to potentially a greater level, or potentially we're just seeing they're capitalising on City's problems. I just enjoy the fact that Tottenham against Manchester City, I think, is my favourite Premier League fixture at the moment. I genuinely think it's sit-down, must-view TV because Tottenham rarely underperform against Manchester City for some reason, whatever it is.
Except when the title's on the line and if they win, then Arsenal will, dot. Let's just ignore that one. Son's clean through and he misses a one-on-one. Doesn't normally happen.
But I think it's still genuinely a consistently good game of football as well. It's two teams that are happy to play football against each other. I've always had a soft spot for Spurs just because of work, meaning that I followed their kind of development through the AVB and then onwards kind of era under Pochettino and everything that's come post that. So I always have a soft spot for a number of those players. Heung-min Son, I think I highlighted when Kane had that injury about 6-7 years ago and Son had just come in and you're like, no, I think Son can actually do a decent job, and watching him develop and become one of the best players, not just in the Premier League, but on a global scale, and particularly as a South Korean as well. It's not like they're churning out greatness after greatness in South Korea in the international stage or when sending players off elsewhere. So I think that's an awesome story to keep following. But yeah, I think it's just one of the best spectacles in football. Two sides that are very good at attacking. City collapsed defensively. And in that game this weekend, there's a chance after about 2.5 minutes when Erling Haaland's clean through. And if he sticks that away, it's a completely different game. Obviously, goals change games. But that summed up where City are, I think, at this point. Of there is just something missing and there's a massive mental fragility. Because you cannot say that the players there can't play without Rodri. And if they can't, that's an embarrassment as a football club that Rodri is that important. There is a mental aspect that's not there. And maybe it's a slightly aged squad. Maybe it's a squad that has now, the majority of them, won everything that they want to win at club level. And you have to reinvigorate, reignite this side's passion somewhere. And that's what Pep Guardiola should be doing. It's a tough job to do for any manager. But yeah, it's just essential viewing Tottenham against Manchester City. You wouldn't have said that 6 years ago, 5 years ago. It just is.
You're right, 10 minutes in. I mean, the first 10 minutes was just all City.
Mm-hmm.
And, they had a couple of big chances. And as you say, if they score those and go and win the game, it's just such a different narrative, such are the fine lines. Before I want to talk about Mo Salah and Liverpool, Ollie, but just in terms of the Premier League title race, Liverpool 8 points clear. I just want to read through a list of the greatest kind of Premier League comebacks, right? Arsenal in 97-98 were 13 points behind and they won the title. Man United in 1992-93 were 12 points behind and they won the title. Man United in 95-96 were 12 points behind and they won the title. Sensing a theme here. Man United in 1996-97 were 10 points behind and they won the title. Man United in 2002-2003 were 10 points behind, they won the title. 2008-2009 were 10 points behind, they won the title. City 2018-19 were 10 points behind, won the title. I mean, it's not unheard of historically in the Premier League to be a big deficit behind. The point that was made by ourselves and many others at the start of the season is that because Manchester City had raised this crazy bar, you could no longer afford to drop that many points behind. But now we're having a Premier League season that feels a little bit more like the Arsenal Man United contest back in the 90s and early noughties. So maybe there is a possibility for Arsenal or City to be 8 points, 10 points, 11 points behind and still come back and win the title this year.
Well, I hope so. I definitely hope that it gets more competitive than it has been. I think my worry, if you're a City or an Arsenal fan right now, is it's not just going forward that Liverpool look good, as we've said from the word go this season. I know they conceded a couple against Southampton this weekend.
Sure. Still the best.
It's going to happen. But without a doubt, miles ahead of anybody else defensively, statistically or on a visual aspect as well this season. So that would be my worry, is that Liverpool don't have a trend of conceding many, and they still have a great amount of firepower going forward. So I would be a little anxious. I would want to see a couple of more points dropped and going into the busy Christmas period just to give yourself a chance. But there's always a chance in football. I mean, you said the title race was over after 3 weeks. City were going to walk it.
What I said, Ollie, and we'll have to track back here, get the retrospective harp in action. But I think what I said is Arsenal couldn't win the title, rather than the title race was 100%
You look right at this
over.
point. Arsenal, I don't think, can win the title.
Well, yeah, we'll see what happens. Let's talk about Liverpool and Mo Salah. Scored a couple of goals at the weekend. I mean, what can you say? As a consistent performer in the Premier League, up there with absolutely anyone in terms of his goals and assists output. I think if he stays at the football club for another couple of years, he gets close to what Wayne Rooney did in terms of 200 odd Premier League goals and 100 odd Premier League assists. He'll do that if he stays. He said after the game yesterday, in quotes that have come out today, there's been no contract offer from the club. Now, I just want to, you might be surprised to hear, Ollie, I just want to play devil's advocate here because I actually think the Liverpool Football Club have played an absolute blinder with this. I really do. And that's because Liverpool, in the transfer market and contractually over the last 10 years, haven't really missed too much. And they haven't really missed too much because they managed to separate logic and emotion. And the emotion now is that Mo Salah is this goal-scoring machine as ever. He's fired up. He's scoring goals. He's providing assists. He's fantastic. Give him what he wants. Give him what he wants. Jamie Carragher came up with a great line, which I think is a banner Liverpool fans have got, which is give Mo the dough, or something like that. Pay him whatever he wants. Give him the 5-year contract. Football's not like that. Life's not like that. Mo Salah's, I think he's 33 in the summer, right? The contract offer is not about what Mo Salah has done and is doing for Liverpool. It's about what Mo Salah will do in the next 2, 3, 4 years. And the club are obviously being very difficult. But in doing so, in playing a hard line with Mo Salah, they've created a pissed off Mo Salah. He's furious. I think you can see it with how he plays. You can see it with how he celebrates. By the way, that torso reveal, I mean, I don't know whether you've seen it, Ollie, but anyone should look at that in their 30s and be like, Jesus, I need to hit the gym. That is an obscene correlation of genetics and discipline. Cristiano Ronaldo-esque. Absolutely unbelievable physique. But I think Liverpool's job is to have a Mo Salah who's scoring goals and is going to win them trophies. And they've got that. They've pissed him off. They've obviously pissed him off. And sometimes, with some individuals, that's the best way to do it. As I say, I just think the club have done really well because I think they don't owe Mo Salah a 5-year contract. They really don't. And apparently what they've offered him is a 2-year contract. And Salah thinks Salah wants the longevity of a 5-year contract. 2-year contract takes him to 35. Salah can still go to Saudi. I think the club is spot on. I also don't think there's too many clubs that are in Europe that are gonna offer Mo Salah a 5-year contract despite his stats. So yeah, the main narrative here, Ollie, from most people will be like, why haven't the club sorted it out? And I agree with that on Virgil van Dijk and Trent Alexander-Arnold for different reasons. But with Mo Salah, I actually think the club are completely legitimately hanging on, waiting, playing hardball, not showing their hand. And in January, when he can sign a pre-contract with another club, I guess that's when they give him a take it or leave it, 2.5 year deal, and say, if you want to leave Mo Salah, then you leave. But I think the club have done well here.
Yeah, we get into this point where I always struggle with fans of the big business side and the individual player side, because in American sport, there are teams that won't, due to things like salary caps, etc., give certain stars big amounts of money because they think, well, you might only have 2 more years of considerable production. We've got a cap to think about, so we're not going to give you the bag. We're going to let you go somewhere else, let some other team give you that money if they want to, or you can sit there and hope that offers come in free agency. And if they don't, then you can take the offer that we're giving you right now, or you can go and find somewhere else new to play. And people think I'm a bit harsh on that when I say that, particularly with running backs in the NFL, for instance, because running back, you can get hurt, you can get hit, that's your career over in one play. So why would you give a guy that is basically running into a pile of bodies every single time they touch the ball, pretty much, the opportunity to get a huge amount of money, which you could then see as completely lost if the guy ends up being injured for 2 years, doesn't come back as the same guy, etc. And I look at this in the same way, and I have commiserations with that, because there are some running backs that should be paid so much more in the NFL, but they're just an asset that, from a business point of view, is easily rotated around. You can find a fast guy that can run through blocks. It's about finding the blocks. And I think in Mo Salah's case, it's kind of similar. Salah's game relies largely on a lot of pace, a lot of quality. So I don't see his career having the same longevity, for instance, as a Dimitar Berbatov or a Zlatan Ibrahimovic, whose game could easily adapt due to their height, stature, their physicality, as being a target man that holds up, bring others into play. Salah doesn't necessarily play like that, and I don't think that is going to come into his game in that same way, unless he becomes a Darmian Diaz, sits there as a number 10, doesn't run at all until he's 42. So if you're Liverpool right now, at the 32-year-old Mo Salah, you're thinking, we have 2 really good years of Mo before Mo drops off. So why would we give him anything more than a 2 or 3 year deal at this point? Why would we break the bank on that? And the other thing you have is Mo Salah with a contract year coming up. Players in sport play better when there's the potential for a new deal. It just happens. You see it in so many sports where, I've got 6 to 8 months left on my contract. I better show the world that I'm worth this. Then they go and get a load of money, and production can sometimes drop off. It's that feeling hungry that the boxer who fought Joshua, who beat Joshua Ruiz, who won the world heavyweight title and then ballooned because he said, I wasn't hungry anymore, ironically.
He was hungry.
He was very hungry from the looks of it.
He's a big lad.
And then losing the heavyweight titles got him back into shape, got him boxing at a high level again, because that hunger came back. He wanted to achieve it again. He'd had a taste of it and he wanted more again. Ironically, that's what he did when he'd won it. And I think this could be the same thing, that Liverpool are looking at this and saying, well, while you're still producing at this high level, why would we think about having a contract negotiation with you when this is the best time for you to negotiate a contract, because you're producing for us? If you drop off in the second half of the year, we'll have a conversation, because that's when you're a better asset to negotiate with. Your production's going down, your value's going down. We can give you a 2.5 year contract for a little less money than you were demanding, maybe in November, December, when you were flying high. So I think it's smart from Liverpool, and I think they might be smart as well to kind of think longevity and keep things moving, because there's too much short-sightedness in sport where you put all your eggs into one basket and hope that that's the guy that's going to turn it around for you in 12 months. Whereas actually thinking that's the guy who's going to be good for 8 months and then we need to look for a replacement is a far smarter way to go about things.
There's a great scientific analogy here, Ollie, which I think I've nicked from another podcast. They did a study in America, of course, and they had a bunch of rats, right? And they attached a spring to the back of the rats. You might have heard of this before. And in front of the rats, outside the cage, first of all, they starved the rats. So the rats are absolutely ravenous, okay? And then they put some cheese just in front of the rats, so they couldn't get to the cheese, but they could smell it, okay? And they could see it. And the rats pulled on the springs being a proxy for desire, right? Mm-hmm. And the rats were pulling so hard, and you could measure the desire of the rats to get to this cheese. And let's say they were pulling so hard, and it was a 10. And then they did the same study with the same rats, but they wafted the smell of a cat behind the rats. And so the rats weren't just moving towards the cheese because they were hungry, but they were running away from the cats. And the rats actually pulled on the spring doubly as hard. You'd think they'd be pulling as hard as they possibly could anyway because they want the cheese. Let's call it the new contract in this situation. But also Mo Salah might just have him behind him. Shit, I'm without a club in January. You know, he's just got this thing behind him. I haven't been given a contract yet. And there's this fear, this probably financial and professional fear that's been wafted in at the same time as the temptation of a new contract. So yeah, that's a roundabout.
Well, that will come if Liverpool also go out in January and maybe look at get linked to a couple of youngsters that can fill in that role on the flanks. And suddenly Mo Salah's thinking, they are looking at something else, and that's the cap. That's the cap behind them, the fear of the next young thing coming up and replacing you. Because no one's irreplaceable in sport. Not even, maybe Rodri, as we're seeing with Manchester City. But aside from that, no one's irreplaceable in sport. And there's always a next guy coming up that wants to take your place. And he's the one who's after your cheese. And he's the rat on the other side of the cage trying to get.
Okay, Ollie, let's talk about Ed Sheeran being rude. I actually want you to lead this one, Ollie, because I've seen the clip, but I fear if I start, we might just ascend into a tirade too quickly.
Well,
so take a deep breath, Ollie, and tell us what happened, first of all, if you haven't seen the clip.
This is Dave Windsor's favourite new segment in sports broadcasting, which is which celebrity can we roll out for an awkward moment on television. It's, get your bingo cards selected for the rest of the Sky Sports Christmas schedule. See which teams are playing and see which celebrities are linked to them, because they'll probably make an appearance at this point. Kelly Cates is doing her best to anchor a show with 3 pundits and obviously Amorim, the Manchester United manager, who they're having a discussion with post the draw with Ipswich on the weekend. And suddenly, Ed Sheeran just rocks up pitchside to have a chat with Jamie Redknapp while he's on air. Massively rude to just go up to a TV broadcaster while he's on air holding a microphone trying to have a discussion with the brand new Manchester United manager. But also immensely rude then of Sky to almost acknowledge this, break off from Amorim's answer afterwards and say, oh, Ed Sheeran's here. And in fairness, I actually think Kelly Cates felt very awkward in that moment more than anything else, because she kind of, oh, yeah, cheers, Ed, sod off kind of thing. And Ed Sheeran kind of just lingering around, and Redknapp gives him a microphone for half a second to say a couple of bits about like how great it was. And in the meantime, you've got this Manchester United boss who's coming from Sporting after basically being berated and badgered by English press for the last 10 days or so. And he suddenly has to come in thinking, right, I'm going to give the English press what they want me, talking in English on their television, have the quotes. This is my conversation piece after a Manchester United first game in charge. And suddenly it's Ed Sheeran's interrupting me. And he looked humiliated. And I think he deserves to feel humiliated, because it's just ridiculous what we're doing right now. Like, Ed Sheeran's a massive Ipswich Town supporter, I get that. But I also know that Ed Sheeran was seen walking around with a pint of Guinness in his hand after the game, kind of around the tunnel area and stuff like that. So Ed Sheeran's had a couple of drinks. And the last thing we need is another Jamie Carragher with the Dortmund fans sort of moment of somebody coming on pissed up on TV talking about the game, when I'd much rather hear from a manager who, let's face it, we don't get too much juicy gossip from managers and players in those post-match interviews anyway. But I would still much rather hear that than hear celebrity fan zone with pissed up Ed Sheeran. It was just weird. I really didn't like it, didn't appreciate it at all. And it's something that needs to be stamped out pretty quickly, I think, in my opinion.
Ed Sheeran, Ed, if you're listening, you're probably a nice fella, but as you say, it had a couple of drinks and it was just a massive error of judgment, and it did come across as incredibly rude. Ruben Amorim doesn't care and probably doesn't know who you are really and your connection to Ipswich. It was so odd, it was so awkward. I agree with you, Kelly Cates did a great job. What can you do if an A-list celebrity walks into the shot on air? You can't.
The only thing else you could do is say, oh, Ed Sheeran's joining us. Ed, we're going to get to you in a minute. And then you turn as Kelly and look only at Amorim, and you shut that shoulder.
And the camera turns as...
But 100%, there's a Sky producer there going, oh, Ed Sheeran's there. Let's get Ed in. Get Ed in for a second. It's like, that's when you're caught between a rock and a hard place, I imagine, as a broadcaster, when you're trying to respect the person you're interviewing, and then you've got a producer telling you, no, look at this, look at this, look at this. The worst thing to me is going up to a live broadcast. We bemoan it on transfer deadline day when the poor Sky Sports reporters are stood outside grounds and all the idiots turn up hey, we're signing and all that. And that's kind of faded off a bit, actually, in the last few years in general. But we used to hate that when it was just regular fans doing that. The fact it's a pissed up Ed Sheeran doesn't make it any more acceptable, because in that moment, he's not Ed Sheeran, the celebrity singer. He's Ed Sheeran, the Ipswich Town fan. And he's pissed up, and it's just irritating.
Well, it's not going to be often that we talk about the Copa Sudamericana before the Libertadores, but because the final was at the weekend, I think we can. Ollie gave a great preview to the final about how good Racing were going to be, and it proved to be the case, Ollie. The final in Asunción, Paraguay. South America's Europa League. Racing of Argentina. A club with an amazing history. Won it, lifted the trophy. What do you think of it? I don't know whether you managed to catch the game or you've seen the highlights or you saw the fans being sprayed in balmy, hot Asunción prior to kick-off. It was all going on,
Yeah, did you see how much the stands were shaking as well? The Racing supporters were just...
This is worth checking out on Twitter.
Rocking that stadium. To the point where you are genuinely scared of how well the Estadio General Pablo Rojas is going to be able to handle what was taking place. And I thought I'd seen a rocking stadium in Asunción when the Colón fans turned up in 2019 and turned up en masse. And there were about 3 Ecuadorian supporters for Independiente del Valle and everything else was red and black. But this was a raucous Racing crowd that was so up for it. And the side were as well. And it was pretty much a demolition from the word go. And I'm a big fan of John Cotterill. Dave, I know you've been mentioned in his book before. He's a lovely guy to work with, great guy around the office as well when we get to see him. And he and Pete Coates did a wonderful job on the broadcast, except for one thing, which was Racing had a goal disallowed for VAR in the first 3 minutes. They're 2-0 up after about 20 minutes. And John missed the perfect Racing are racing away with it line after 20 minutes. That was the only thing I was begging him to say it because I was like, oh, this is too good. You know, they've had a lucky goal. Then Martinez has scored this one to add to his tally and he finishes up as a top scorer in the competition. And it was just hanging there like the lowest hanging fruit that you could possibly have. And I think the snake might have even been passing it with its tail to him, just saying, take a bite out of this low hanging fruit. And it was begging to be said, but it was an excellent broadcast by those two. And, an excellent performance from Racing, just dominated Cruzeiro really from the word go. And look, I know after half-time, Caio Jorge gets a goal back and it becomes a bit more of a contest, but really the attacking prowess of that Racing side just came to the forefront straight away. It was awesome to watch, and the best side won, without a doubt.
And what a football club, by the way. Ollie and I have been to Racing's ground in Buenos Aires, and it's this crumbling, historic ground, dripping with kind of nostalgia and history and a sketchier part of town, etc., etc. If you're ever in Buenos Aires, then get involved.
And then they've got that beautiful mural next to the ground of their Libertadores victory. The Club World Cup as well. Victory.
Yeah, the Club World Cup
in the 60s at the Avellaneda, and
which is a long time ago.
But I mean, they're all these RG sides and some of the Brazilian sides are just clinging on to all of this. Yeah, it's superb. Yeah, couldn't have been a better final.
Let's talk. Oh, lovely stuff. Let's talk about the Botafogo very briefly. This is potentially the biggest bottle job story in sport in 2024. Botafogo of Brazil have 4 games left of their season, and this week will either be the greatest week in the history of the football club or it will be the worst week in the history of their football club, because Botafogo are level on points with Palmeiras at the top of the Brazilian standings. Botafogo, a side who have only won 2 league titles in their history, never won the Libertadores. They go away to Palmeiras in midweek. They've drawn their last 3 games. They were comfortably clear at the top of the table. But just like last season, Ollie, Botafogo have bottled it. Now Palmeiras are in the driving seat. Botafogo need to go to Palmeiras midweek and win to put themselves back in control of the title race. A crazy situation to be in. To bottle a league title in back-to-back seasons is mental. And then on Saturday night, they have the Libertadores final against Atlético Mineiro. So it's the biggest week in Botafogo's history. They could beat Palmeiras, go back to the top of the table and win the Libertadores, or it could be just the worst week for Botafogo. And as I say, won't get any column inches in the British media, but it really, really should do, because this is just an amazing story. Last season, they were kind of 10 points clear at the top of the title and they were caught. And this season, it looks like it's happened again. And just the psychology of sport is just so wild. Botafogo drawn their last 3 games, and Palmeiras won their last 3 to kind of pip ahead, to nick ahead right at the end of the season. You know, what about the psychology?
Well, you know how you can tell a side is cracking? When they've had 3 red cards in 5 games. That is a bad sign that you're suddenly seeing things start to fall apart. It all started from Peñarol kind of putting the heebie-jeebies up them slightly in that semi-final second leg. And since then, and not only that, have you seen how congested that schedule is? Mm-hmm. So we're on November the 25th recording this right now. Since November the 21st, they've had 2 games already. They've got this midweek game against Palmeiras and then the Libertadores final on Saturday. I mean, that is a brutal schedule. When Pep Guardiola's talking about, the nightmare of this and that, and we're playing so many games, etc. Try playing
and the size of the continent, Ollie. The size of the continent. An away day in Brazil can be 5 hours away. It's crazy.
4 games in 9 days is bonkers. Particularly then when you're fighting on the 2 biggest stages that your club cares about the most, and you've got the pressure of last season. And look, all I'll say is for Saturday is I hope it's not like the game 4 days ago, because these 2 sides met, 2 sendings off, 0-0 draw. Tension, excitement, all that drama, but we need a good Libertadores final from 2 Brazilian sides, which we haven't really had when they've met on the last few occasions. Obviously, Boca lost in the final last year, and that was actually a reasonably entertaining final in terms of a bit of cut and thrust about it. But these all Brazilian finals tend not to be too interesting. So we need that trend to be bucked, so to speak. Otherwise, I'm already more in on the Sudamericana, I think, than the Libertadores anyway. But if this is another drab final, you can count me out of the CONMEBOL Libertadores, mate. It's done for me.
Yeah, we've heard this before, mate. Let's just to wrap up on the South American football. Palmeiras' boss is a fella called Abel Ferreira. He won 2 league titles in Brazil. He's won 2 Libertadores with Palmeiras. He's 45 years old. Now's the time, surely, Ollie, for him to come back to Europe. And he's the best coach on the continent in South America. It used to be Marcelo Gallardo, now it's Abel Ferreira. Now's the time, mate. I mean, he's done everything he can with Palmeiras. I think they're in the Club World Cup next summer. They must be. So I just think after that, it's time. Go back to, he can take any job he wants in Portugal, but maybe La Liga or Serie A, something like that. He's a top coach.
Why? Why would you take then a mid-level job in European football when you're with the Green Giant?
He's done everything he can. Because he's done everything he can at Palmeiras.
But it's the Grant Holt philosophy. Grant Holt banging goals in with Norwich City, getting himself mentions for England call-ups, etc. because it worked there. And if it's working, don't stray too much from what's working until it stops really working. And it works for Abel Ferreira at Palmeiras, because when you Grant Holt and you go somewhere else, the goals don't come in the same manner. And all of those England call-up potentials suddenly go flying out the window, and you're back to being Grant Holt, lump up front reputation. So if I'm Abel Ferreira, and there's not too many times that Grant Holt and Abel Ferreira will be mentioned in the same sentence, I'm sure.
I'm going to say it's the only time.
If I'm Abel Ferreira, I stick it out until the wheels have completely fallen off at Palmeiras and they're chasing you out of Sao Paulo. Ride it out, because you're still doing better in that city than Corinthians, which is basically the main thing that most of the supporters want anyway. And ride it till the wheels fall off.
All right, let's wrap up the football with the Champions League, Ollie, because it's match day 5 in the Champions League this week. I think probably for me the most interesting story is the fact that Real Madrid are in massive trouble in the Champions League. I think they've got 6 points in their opening 4 games. And their next 2 games, Ollie, are Liverpool away on Wednesday night, and then on match day 6 in this Champions League, European Super League, they have Atalanta away. And I just think for Real Madrid, they're not going to finish in the top group of sides that will miss the playoff. At the moment, they're in that middle chunk. But, Ollie, they could actually drop down into the relegation places in the Champions League. Because if Liverpool can beat them at Anfield and they go away to Atalanta needing something, Atalanta who, Ollie, absolutely flying in Italy, right? Top of the table, if I'm not mistaken. I think they won at the weekend. It's certainly very, very tight up there, but I think they're top. Real Madrid, Liverpool away, Atalanta away, lose both of those games, which is possible. And all of a sudden, Real Madrid are going to be relegated from the Champions League. I don't know. It's interesting. And by the way, I am calling it the Champions League for the rest of the time because that's what
I wanted to bring that up, because that is the best phrase in football, the Champions League. I don't like league phase. I mean, you look, though, at this setup still. I just can't see Real Madrid dropping out. The only side that would take potentially their spot is Paris Saint-Germain, who aren't in that going through to the next round of this Champions League playoff phase, so to speak. But if we're talking about Real Madrid being in trouble, and obviously the 2 games coming up, I think you only need 9 points anyway to get through this from what we're seeing and the quality of football. So you've got Paris Saint-Germain, 25th on the outside looking in of these playoffs. Then you've got Sparta Prague, Stuttgart may be a potential kind of squeeze in. Shakhtar, Girona, RB Salzburg, Bologna, RB Leipzig, Sturm Graz, Young Boys, Red Star, and Slovan Bratislava. And the bottom 5 haven't got a point yet. Bologna have only had 1 point so far, haven't scored yet in the competition. PSG are 2 points off Real Madrid right now, 4 points for PSG, 6 for Real Madrid. I just think one more win will get you over that hurdle. And it's too difficult to fail in this competition, which is why I'm not worried about it. Just don't think... The real problem for Real Madrid right now is that bringing in Kylian Mbappe for this side has made them worse. And the reports that have been coming out all season long so far of Mbappe just not moving. And I don't know what it is about Real Madrid when there are some players that will go there and immediately just go with what it is at Real Madrid, to be football royalty, to wear that shirt, to be part of that club, and they'll embrace it and work their nads off for it. And then there are other players, like Eden Hazard, for instance, who say it's their dream to go there, they get that, and they go, I've had my dream. I get to wear this shirt. And for whatever reason, things just stop. And Mbappe, it seems, has just stopped. And there's a real problem that they've had this season so far of him and Bellingham basically trying to play the same position. And that's a real problem. Because if you're stifling Bellingham and Kylian Mbappe, you're taking 2 of your best assets out of the game by those 2 being stood next to each other for most of it. And that's what they have to get right if they are going to think about going any further. But they're going to get through this. It just will happen. And if not, that's humiliating. It's humiliating for Real Madrid if they don't.
For sure. And just on the Mbappe thing, scored at the weekend, set up by Vinicius Jr., and I actually watched the game. And the issue is, Ollie, they all want to play in the same place. Like Vinicius Jr. and Mbappe want to drift left. Instinctively, that's what they want to do. And Jude Bellingham as well, obviously he's more central, but he also naturally, I think, just drifts a little bit left. So you're in this odd position where the 3 of them really want to make the same runs, or certainly Vinicius Jr. and Mbappe, they want to make the same runs. They want to occupy the same space. And they won at the weekend, and it was very comfortable against Leganés. But against top sides, they're just going to figure that out. If you close that little gap there, then you can kind of stop Real Madrid. They've had loads of injury problems. I think the game against Liverpool is really interesting because there's a few little subplots in there. Obviously, Real Madrid beat Liverpool in a couple of Champions League finals in the last 6-7 years. And also, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who might not be recovered from the hamstring injury, but if he is and he starts, Ollie, then you've got that kind of subplot of Trent against probably, I would say, his future.
But this is the thing now with this Champions League phase, right? Liverpool, 12 points going through. Whether they make it into the top 8 now is the only thing that they're really fighting for. You don't need to play your elite starting 11 against Real Madrid. You don't need to show your hand. Liverpool
could rest everyone.
At all. Yeah.
Liverpool could rest everyone. They play Man City at Anfield on Sunday. Slot won't do this because he doesn't seem to be the rotation kind of guy. But another coach, Ollie, with a few years in the bank at the club, that has complete control over everything that goes on, could very easily say, okay, you know what, we're going to play a B-side against Real Madrid. If we lose 4-1, doesn't really matter because we're going through in that top group anyway. We're going to miss the playoff. And then you have everyone fresh for what's a bigger game against Manchester City. Whatever happens on Wednesday, Liverpool will qualify for the Champions League knockout stage. So it is an odd situation. I also think when you were reading off that list of sides that are going to get relegated from the Champions League, none of them were going to win it anyway. So it is an odd thing where we've had this extended group stage now, which has gone from 8 games essentially. It's gone from 6 games to 8 games. For what? To relegate a bunch of sides that were never going to win it anyway. So it's an odd one. I actually do like the Champions League, but I think it's... I'm not quite sure what we're going to end up with. I think the playoff will be fun in late January, early February, because I think then you're going to get the Real Madrid against Bayern, and I think that's exciting. But wasn't that the same as the last 16 in the Champions League? Like, you got good ties then. So, yeah, bit of an odd one. More is more, but that's the Champions League. But I do think that match day 5 and 6 will be super interesting. Way more interesting than the first 4 match days.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point of this, I think, is to bring more of a climax to the end of the group stages with this league phase, because the group stages, you could argue, were... some sides will have 3 wins in 3, job done. You could still argue that that's kind of the case with some of these. Liverpool 4 wins in 4, Sporting, Monaco, Brest, Inter, 10 points after 4 games. It'd be hard to see any of them falling into the clutches of being knocked out of the competition completely. Then it just becomes a
15.
Do you want to play in a playoff round? Are you fussed by that playoff round and having that jeopardy, or do you want to put yourself in that top 8, avoid that playoff round, and be in the next round of 16, so to speak? And for some sides like Brest, that's massively important, For a Liverpool, I would imagine they would back themselves whatever happens to be able to get through that anyway. They're probably not going to have to worry about that because they've put themselves in a great position. So,
yeah, I also think it's interesting, Ollie, how the AI stats have already figured it out, basically. 15 points sees you go through and not be involved in the playoffs, so you're in that first group. So, yeah, if you're on 12 points at this point, you're going to get another 3 points in the next 4 games. And then, as you said, 9 points will basically mean you stay in the Champions League. And I think that in future years, clubs will look at it and they will know 9 points, 10 maybe, but all we need is 10 points from these 8 games. And we go through and then, all right, we'll take a chance in the playoff. It's the same as just a knockout round in the Champions League. So I think that'll be a big feature of the Champions League next year. That's 45 minutes on the beautiful game, Ollie. Let's go to other sport. Where do you want to start, mate? F1, golf, NFL, Andy Murray coaching Djokovic. Like, where do you want to start?
Let's stick with tennis because I know you'll have something to say on Andy Murray and Djokovic kind of partnering up. I know Djokovic has had a fair bit to say about, isn't it great? One of my greatest rivals now gets to be in my corner. This is a fantastic moment. Murray's going to coach Djokovic for, is it the Australian Open?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, coming up in probably the new year. And I don't know, like, I wouldn't necessarily want one of the guys I've been competing at the highest level with coming in and saying, actually, mate, I knew I could get you on that backhand. And because obviously in the tennis world, I think there's a lot more kind of love and appreciation, as we saw from the kind of Rafa Nadal tributes after he played his last ever game of tennis, falling out of the Davis Cup for Spain against the Netherlands in the quarterfinal stage the other day. And the tributes came pouring out. Officially retired now, Nadal, one of the greatest ever. Obviously, Federer, Djokovic, Murray, everybody in the sporting world has said how great he was. And there doesn't seem to be that animosity in tennis compared to a lot of other sports. But yeah, if I'm Djokovic, I wouldn't necessarily like Andy Murray stepping in and going, I could always get you on that second serve because I knew you were going there. These are your tendencies. But maybe it's what Djokovic needs if he wants to be the guy to elevate himself above Nadal and Federer by the time he ends up hanging up his racket as well.
Well, he's already done that. He's already done that because he's won more slams. So, yeah, he is better. I think, by the way, tennis is probably the only sport on NASP where Windsor has slightly more knowledge than Wilson. Every other sport you can think of. Football, I'll give us parity, Ollie, but literally every other sport, Wilson School and Windsor. But yeah, look, let me say, Ollie, that first of all, it's really weird. Like, it's a bizarre thing. There aren't too many comparisons like this because Andy Murray's only just retired. He doesn't have an extensive coaching body of work behind him. And as you say, like, he was a competitor until like a few years ago, really. And they had so many great rivalries and have known each other since they were kids. So it's a really odd one. There's literally no comparison as close to this. But Andy Murray does have a history of doing some kind of random things in his career. Because he actually hired Amelie Mauresmo as his coach way back when. It didn't last very long. But I remember at the time there was an interesting story because no one had ever really seen a top male tennis player hire a female coach in that way. And it was a very intriguing appointment from Andy Murray at the time. And then a few others have been interesting. Becker coaching Novak Djokovic and Ivan Lendl coaching Murray. But you know, Becker and Lendl and Mauresmo, they'd all well retired from the sport before they got involved. Andy Murray retired 2 seconds ago. And he's just been obviously on the golf course for a few months. And like every top sports star, they can't, it's just in them. Or they can't read a book and play golf for the rest of their life. They can't do that. It's not about money anymore. Could. It's just the fires inside.
If they really love the golf game, Dave, they definitely could. It's very easy.
Mate, he's apparently his handicap's 2, Andy Murray. So do you need 0 to when do people start consider scratch is 0?
Yeah,
right?
Scratch is 0. People would go pro Ian Poulter went pro when he was 4, I think it was. So he wasn't even a scratch golfer when he turned pro. But then there are people I know that are playing at +3, which is where you start at 3 over, which is below, like 3 shots below scratch is just mind-boggling to me. And they're not pros yet, but they haven't got the love of the game. Anyway, sorry, digress. We're already getting into the golf.
No, but Andy Murray is not even 40, and he's got a handicap of 2. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's a segue.
Like rubbing it in at me. Is this what we're doing? Sorry, is this jibes about my golf game? Andy Murray's not even 40 yet, and he's a lot better at this sport. You keep trying at this, Ollie. Andy's a great tennis pro, and he's now going to coach the best tennis player of all time. I mean, what have you ever done?
I think I think what's really interesting about this, as you say, is what exactly is Andy Murray going to add to Novak Djokovic at the Aussie Open? I also find it very interesting. It's just for the Australian Open, so Murray's going to get involved. I think he's going to coach Djokovic during some practice, maybe in Europe. I think in late December was the talk, and then January is the Australian Open. So what do you think Novak Djokovic and Andy Murray have said? What's Andy Murray said to pitch to Djokovic, and what's Djokovic asked of Andy Murray? Who sent that first WhatsApp is a fascinating one to me. But, I mean, what exactly is Andy Murray going to be able to add? By the way, the reason that Novak Djokovic has been at the top for so long is because clearly there's a massive ego on him, like every sports star. But he also has an incredible chameleon-like flexibility, because to think of something like that unusual, I just think it displays a real ability to put your ego to the side and him thinking, what can I do to just get that extra 0.1% that might see me go above Margaret Court in the overall slam titles, which is probably his last year that he can make it happen. It's a super weird
I don't understand. I've actually been thinking about it now. I get why Djokovic does it for the reasons that I kind of mentioned a moment ago. What I don't understand is, what does Andy Murray get out of it? Because as you say, it's one slam. It's not...
To be around greatness. To be around greatness, Ollie. To be a part of someone else's greatness.
Sucking on the teat of Novak Djokovic is just such a...
But isn't that why ex-footballers become coaches?
Yeah.
Like, they can't ever replace what they did, but it's like they're just desperate to be part of that kind of circle, that whirlwind of genius.
Well, but that's the difference is there. Football players become coaches because they're desperate to stay in the team environment.
Is that you being Donald Trump, by the way, again?
They're desperate.
Novak Djokovic.
What a player. He's got a great forehand. I taught him that, actually. I showed him his forehand.
Novak's Djokovic.
Oh, that's so good. That is so good. Novak's Djokovic.
Obviously, I didn't call it.
That's a peak moment.
At the time.
Yeah, no, I do think I do wonder, what Murray gets out of it, because you don't coach Novak Djokovic for one slam and people go, "What a great coach! What a great coach!" You know, no one does that except maybe Big Donny T himself. So Murray's not really getting coaching experience. He's having to deal with the ego of Novak Djokovic through a Grand Slam and see behind the curtain, if you will. But aside from that, and maybe staying relevant, but Andy Murray's very relevant in tennis anyway. He's going to be beloved in this country for years on end. He's going to be able to make so much money as a TV pundit for US and UK sports stations, etc. when it comes to Wimbledon and the big slams. I don't really get why Andy Murray would do it. Whereas Djokovic, I kind of understand, because it's the equivalent of like Sir Alex Ferguson going and working under Arsene Wenger for a few years, and Fergie going, "Oh yeah, we knew we could get you here and we could get you there and we could do this." It's like your greatest enemy is your biggest asset if they're willing to tell you what your weaknesses are that they could exploit, and that's what Djokovic potentially gets.
He's got 4 kids. Andy Murray's got 4 kids. Nice to get out of the house a bit.
Oh, right, I thought you were meaning like he's got 4 kids to feed. It's like, I think he's good on the money, Dave. Unless he's got...
No, I think he's probably financially done all right. But you know what I mean? Like, nice to January. It's kind of cold in the UK in January. Like,
get off to Australia for a few weeks.
Do you mind if I just do a month in Australia? I mean, coaching Novak Djokovic is possibly going to be easier than running around his house with 4 kids.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, plus you can bring back some fun Christmas presents for them from Australia, a hat with the corks on, all that kind of stuff. Give one a didgeridoo.
I'm sure Kim will be fine.
Yeah,
you know, Kim will be fine looking after the 4 kids.
Sue Murray will be able to help out as well. Is that his mum, Sue Murray? Is it? Yeah. Judy, that's it. Sue sounds better. Yeah, Judy Murray, though. Yeah, sorry, Judy.
Sue Barker, Judy Murray.
Same. He's got his tennis mum and his actual mum. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Other sports. F1. Is Vegas better than Monaco?
It's horrible. It's so ugly. It's such an ugly Grand Prix to view. Because we were sold this spectacle of the Las Vegas Grand Prix. It's going to look great with the lights. God, now I keep thinking everything I do is like Trumpy. I can still see it. For those
only audio only, you gotta nip onto the YouTube.
I'm gonna start doing the Trump dance like all the freaking footballers are doing with their goal celebrations, which is also something we should touch on. How people have gone insane.
Yeah. Let's touch on it now. What do you? I mean,
Christian Pulisic has come out and said he just thought it was funny. It's not like a Christian Pulisic is putting the red Republican flag in the middle of the field to be like, yeah. Let's close the borders, make America great again, and Trump dance for the celebration. Like, it's not that at all. It's a dangerous line to bring politics and political iconography into sport, obviously, particularly with the country as split down the middle as it is in America. But it's not just... Barnsley players were doing it on the weekend. So it's not...
It's a funny dance. It's a funny dance. Like, I don't care... Like I've said on this pod before, I don't care about American politics. I actually hate the politicization of sport.
Yeah.
Like... Yeah, I hate that. Like, I got into sport because I love sport. Like, I don't care about any of the rest of it. And yeah, I don't know. Like, it's a funny dance. Like, it's an old man doing a dance. It's funny. Like, but I get, like, America's a deeply divided country, and yeah, it's a funny dance. Like, it's a funny dance.
It's just, like I said, the fact, I don't think Donald Trump had in his mind that it was going to become a thing that Christian Pulisic or any of the US men's national team players would do, or it's been done in the NFL as well now in the last few weeks. I definitely don't think he would be heading to South Yorkshire and, I really hope at Oakwell they start doing it when Barnsley take on Huddersfield, and that's going to make headlines for me. I just don't see that in his idea of making it a global thing. And it's like the faking injury and then twerking thing. It'll be there for like 3 weeks, and then something new will happen, and it'll be fine. Mm-hmm. Where were we?
F1.
Oh, yeah, F1.
Yeah, Terry Crews, by the way, was what I did. F1 was on the background during the figure skating. Ollie. This is a bit different to Ed Sheeran, because Ed Sheeran walks in unannounced, whereas Terry Crews obviously hired to be. For people that don't know, he's ex-NFL, isn't he? Ex-NFL, Ollie, Terry Crews, and obviously American actor, super
college
famous.
Football. I think he had never really played in the NFL. I think he had injury problems already by that point. But more known for Brooklyn Nine-Nine than for necessarily sporting achievement type stuff.
So good in that, by the way. I remember on a flight to Argy watching literally like 7 hours of that, just chuckling away. Great show.
But yeah, Terry Crews asking the questions to Max Verstappen after the Grand Prix, which is just weird. He's got Jenson Button alongside him to actually ask some real questions as opposed to... And all of those questions, you can see that interview copy-paste in a running order for the production of any Grand Prix at this point. It's, great win. How do you feel the race went? Blah, blah, blah. And, superb victory. What does it mean for the team and the season overall? Blah, 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 blah. And just lastly, the fans in country X, how did it go? What did you make of the event, etc.? Aren't they amazing? They're great. Everything. It's just copy and paste. So you can get anybody to do it. It doesn't have to be Jenson Button, a former race winner. It can be Terry Crews. It could be Donald Trump himself handing out the questions to the guys after the race in Vegas. But my problem with Vegas is that we were sold on it being this great spectacle going down the strip, the lights, the beautiful shots, the iconic Vegas sign, etc. And like every night race, it is turned into it's a lit up track, and because the track's so well lit, as it has to be for these drivers driving at 200 mile an hour around a street circuit, everything else kind of fades into the background with this dark murkiness. It doesn't look great from an aesthetic. It's not a great circuit, I don't think, to be honest. And it has no class, the Las Vegas Grand Prix. There is zero class. And everything that Monaco oozes of history and quality and class and south of France...
What do you mean by class?
Vegas is bright, brash, garish. Anybody that's been to Las Vegas will know that you think it's going to be Ocean's 11 and it's more National Lampoon.
It's a shithole.
Yeah,
I've been.
It's guys in the Hawaiian shirts drinking all day, spending the kids' college fund at the blackjack table and hoping. And, that's obviously me being probably a bit low on Vegas at this point, but it's more of that than the high rollers walking around. And that's what I get from this Las Vegas Grand Prix. There are high rollers. You won't see them except on the camera on the grid walk and stuff like that. And everything else is just brash, in your face. Look at this, look at that, look at this. Whereas Monaco doesn't have to do any of that. Monaco doesn't even have a freaking podium properly for its presentation at the end of the race. They literally just walk up to the royal box, which is barely elevated, and hand them the trophies, because that means so much more than having the car raised outside Caesar's Palace and all this naffness. And it's just too much. And it's trying too hard, whereas Monaco doesn't need to try. And that's where the class comes from. It's like a guy that wears a really bright suit to try and stand out, and the guy that can just wear a really good fitted suit. And you go, that guy reeks of class, that guy's peacocking. And Vegas is peacocking to Monaco. And that's why it will never top it as a street circuit.
What about golf, Ollie? I've got written down here PGA rule changes and Sergio Garcia, two different topics.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So this was actually, the PGA rule changes were kind of a week ago that they were ratified, but with the jet lag and flying and everything like that, kind of went past me slightly, although it was on my radar on the flight home, but also was the bottle of fizz. So, things happen. The PGA Tour is basically reducing the tour size from 125 players to 100 players. The 25 players won't be completely cast off. They'll be able to enter in competitions where sponsors want them involved or where the field hasn't been completely filled. So these 25 players will still be able to get on to PGA Tour events, but unlikely the big ones. The level below the PGA, which is called the Corn Ferry Tour, is going to have fewer cards given out at the end of the year for the PGA Tour, going from 30 to 20. So there's less of an opportunity for guys that have lost their PGA Tour card to get back to that level. Same with Q School, which is the kind of equivalent of on a global scale. Only the top 5 finishers rather than the top 5 finishers, and those that were tied with the top 5 will be given PGA Tour cards for the next year. They're reducing the field size. They're changing pace of play rules and such. But it's very much the PGA trying to close ranks, it feels, and make it even more difficult for their big names to be knocked out and go elsewhere. And it's very much removing the jeopardy of relegation, so to speak, even more, and trying to say, look, we've got 100 elites rather than 125, and these guys are going to be playing in pretty much every competition, and turning that live angle of live have everybody playing every competition every single time, and trying to kind of work their way around towards that and make it a slightly more elite status. And I don't know, I've always liked golf of the fact that you can have jeopardy in it, and the fact that it's not easy, but there are opportunities for people to come up into the elite ranks and really make a splash. And with this reduction, you're making it more difficult for those stories to happen. And you're just circling the wagons to make sure that the big dogs can continue to eat at the top table for as long as possible. I'm just not a fan of it, really.
Isn't that just all sport?
But yeah, but that's the way it's going. But that's when you have sports that have been, and particularly the PGA has been saying for the last 3-4 years since the arrival of LIV, we're the traditional golf, we're pure as sport. And then you're making steps to make sure it's not as pure. When they've been removing cuts, now they're reducing the number of people that can play on the tour. You're not being that purity of the sport. You are making sure that you get as much money out of it as possible, and that your stars stay as long as possible as well, which is it's just not a good look more than anything else for the PGA. I think it's pretty ugly. Whereas the DP World Tour, the European Tour, I think is actually now going to become a better product because of this, because people look at the DP World Tour that actually does go around the globe. They do play a lot of events in Europe, but there's a lot elsewhere. And Sergio Garcia of LIV, because the DP hasn't completely cut off ties with the LIV golfers, like the PGA has done, is going to be coming back and rejoining the European Tour next year to ensure that he can get his opportunity to play in the Ryder Cup coming up, obviously, in Bethpage next season.
That's why he's doing it, right?
Yeah. He's manipulating the system to make sure that he can get back to get enough points on the European Tour to be one of the top 5-6 players that will be selected then for the 12-man Ryder Cup team coming up next year. Adrian Maronk, who also went to LIV Golf, Joaquin Niemann, Thomas Peters, Patrick Reed and Lucas Herbert, all from LIV Golf, will be coming back as well to play on various events on the PGA Tour and on the European Tour. And the more the PGA keeps those LIV golfers excluded and the European Tour keeps it kind of open for them, the better it is going to be for the European Tour to bring those stars back. They can flip between LIV and the European Tour. They'll pay the fines that they're being fined for missing certain events because of the LIV golf events that they have to play contractually because they've been given a boatload of money. And it's going to work out far better. And that DP World Tour is going to go from strength to strength, because right now it's kind of like a Rory McIlroy show. You know, this year Rory wasn't competing on the European Tour against the best golfers. He was competing against some good golfers, but not the best. But if the best can flip between LIV and the European Tour, that's the best of both worlds that these LIV golfers really want to have. And it only elevates the status of the DP World Tour and stops it from being the second tier to the PGA Tour that it kind of has become over the last 5 years or so. Dave doesn't care about golf.
I've got a rant. No, I think the golf sections of this pod, and feel free to contact us on Not Another Sports Pod. Remind people of the email address again,
willwinpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, feel free to send your emails in with your questions or WhatsApp one of us, and we'll do our best to delve into the mailbag. Now, I think the golf sections work well, Ollie, as a Wilson monologue, just keeping the NASP audience up to date with what's going on in the world.
Everyone gets a little nap. It's the equivalent of the Cowboys against the Giants on Thanksgiving this year. That's going to be your nap time in between the first game and the third game. You've got your food, you're nice and full, you have a sleep, That's what the golf portion of this show is. This is the... We're also going to ramble on about a few things that are happening in golf and...
Not at all, mate, because actually I know for a fact that a couple of our listeners are massive golf fans and always message me. In fact, one of them messaged me this week to be like, absolutely love that Ollie Wilson cared more about the golf in Dubai than he did about proposing to his girlfriend, now fiance. So don't worry about that. The golf is here to stay on Not Another Sports Pod. I've got a rant about Harry Kane's statue, but did you want to wrap up anything else?
Just very quickly, what's the most humiliating thing you've seen for an athlete, aside from maybe Mike Tyson having to be pulled out of retirement at 58?
Jean van der Velde.
Was that humiliating? Because that was his own choice. So he put himself in that humiliation.
Ollie, I could barely watch it. Jean van der Velde, late 90s?
Yeah, Carnoustie in the burn.
Carnoustie takes off his shoes and socks and goes into the water. And that kind of capitulate, it was a Botafogo-esque bottle job. And it was the most humiliating thing I've seen in sport.
Okay. I think I found the most humiliating thing in sport in the last few days, which is Daniel Jones, the starting quarterback of the New York Giants, former starting quarterback of the New York Giants. So the Giants have had a terrible season. Basically, the Giants had a great running back and this guy, Daniel Jones, as their quarterback, and they had to pay them both. And they refused to pay their running back, Saquon Barkley, who's gone to the Philadelphia Eagles and is the leading rusher, or second leading rusher, in the NFL this year for Philadelphia. They paid Daniel Jones a lot of money, gave him a 5-year deal, I think it was. And Daniel Jones has been pretty shit since then. And after 5 straight losses, the Giants went into their bye week last week. And on that bye week, where teams get randomly allocated like a week off midway through the season at various points to rest, recuperate, reassess, go in for the playoff run, etc. In that bye week, Daniel Jones lost the starting job for the New York Giants, which they gave to a guy, a New Jersey lad called Tommy DeVito, who is Italian-American, and it's the best thing that will happen in sports marketing because his agent wears the fedora, the pinstripe suit, and all the fans do the, hey, what's the matter with you? It's Tommy DeVito. He's a local guy, this guy. I mean, it's just all the Italian-American stereotypes, which apparently are allowed to be yelled from the rooftops as opposed to anything else. So Daniel Jones loses the starting job to Tommy DeVito, gets demoted then to the 4th-string quarterback, then has to go on the scout team in training and play safety. Now, safety is a guy that's like the defensive back, so sits deep in coverage, watches out for deep balls from the quarterback, etc. Sometimes has to cover wide receivers as well. And the scout team is basically the team that is made up of odd jobs around the club that are used to run what next week's offense kind of looks like. So they run what the offense looks like or what the defense looks like, so the starting offense and defense can have a rough idea of how the scheme is going to work out against the opposition coming that week. So to have all of that and then by mutual termination be granted a release from the New York Giants without even playing a game, just loses 5 games in a row, gets dropped and loses everything in his career. It's humiliating what the New York Giants have put him through. Like, drop him, fine, deserves to be dropped. But this is a guy that 2 years ago you said was going to be your starting future at quarterback, which is the most important position in the sport. And instead, you've been relegated to the reserves, asked to play against the first team in the manner in which the opposition's going to be, and then eventually just been dropped out of the team completely. It's humiliating what they've put him through.
Steve McLaren, Wally in a brolly. Wally with a brolly.
Self-imposed.
I remember it was self-imposed, but that was a moment of humiliation where a man was there in the pouring rain with a brolly, and was it England didn't qualify for the World Cup under him or something like that, and the tabloid headline the next day, Wally with a brolly, and it's just I think it's any time, and everyone's experienced this in life, but every time you feel you're desperately out of your depth, that's humiliating. Not like a little bit out of your depth, not like, okay, I can ask someone a question and get a bit of help here and learn as I go, like completely out of your depth. That's humiliating. Allow me to finish this pod, Ollie, with a rant about, there was a statue recently of Harry Kane, but this is more about statues in general of footballers and sports stars. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Going up.
Why does everyone look at a statue, in this case of Harry Kane, and say, that's not very good, is it? It doesn't look like him. It's a fucking statue that a human being, a man, in this instance, Tony Curry, has carved out of bronze. Like, this isn't an AI configuration. This is what a man has created. It's art. It's not supposed to look exactly like Harry Kane. It's supposed to be an artist's impression of Harry Kane. That's the whole point of a statue. Like, it's not supposed to look like... If you want an exact replica of Harry Kane, then, like, you can find that. Like, but this is a statue, and I really hate when people think they're trying to be clever by saying, oh, that's not a good statue of Harry Kane. The face doesn't even look like him. Yeah, because it's been carved out of bronze. Like, it's supposed to embody the essence of Harry Kane in some way through the artist's lens. Like, I don't understand what the, like, ha-ha moment is. So, Tony Curry, I salute you. It's a great statue. And, like, no, it doesn't look 100% like him, but that's the point. I don't know. That's just a random statue.
Tony Curry, the NASP
you know what I mean,
Man of the Week. That's what we'll do, yeah?
100% onto something there. 100% Man of the Week. Well, not Man of the Week, Ollie. Sports person of the week.
Sporting
figure of the week.
Yeah. Look, the difference was the intention there for it to look like him, because that Cristiano Ronaldo one gets battered all the time because it doesn't really look like Cristiano Ronaldo. And if you're going to do impressionism, go Picasso, go Dali, go full on, right, this is my interpretation of it. I've stuck two triangles together with a round circle at the bottom. That's what Harry Kane is to me, you know, or have Harry Kane's face
caricature, like
half melting
or whatever.
Yeah, go nuts. Yeah, do that. Don't. If you're going to try and also you want a statue, it's generally done out of devotion, idolizing that person for their sporting achievements, etc. So you do want it to not do the player a disservice. And if it does the player a disservice by not really looking like them and not showing them how they would necessarily want to be portrayed or how they should be portrayed in this great light, then I can understand why you get some stick for not doing a good job in terms of making it look like them.
I'm surprised Man City didn't have a statue of Rodri.
Oh, it's in the bag. Don't worry. They're just going to get that Gallardo one from the Monumental and just put a Rodri face over the top of it, and that's going to do the rounds for the next few Ballon d'Or winners, because the Gallardo one gets torn down in a few years when it all comes crumbling down for him on his return to River.
Few weeks. All right. Good to go?
That should be the opener every week. All right.
All
It's
right.
like meeting up in a pub. All right. Yeah.